Hi, I'm Edward Funk. Uh, this is podcast number 74, title being Loretta Young and Alan Ladd really didn't like each other. Okay, yeah, please take a note of all the books in back. Uh, we're going to talk more about these in later podcasts, but I'm just finishing up my seventh novel. And then there's also the one, two, three, four, uh, five nonfiction books. So never feel like you don't have enough to read. Okay. Loretta Young and Alan Ladd really did not like each other. Loretta was now 30 years old and extended Father Ward's admonition about the power of example in her personal life to what she did on the screen as well. See, this Father Ward goes way back to when Loretta eloped with actor Grant Withers when Loretta was 17 years old. And she married out of the church, and the priest told her, "Look, you're an actress. People pay attention to what you're doing. So don't think you can just get by with anything. You have to set an example." So in those days, she was thinking about that. Okay, maybe my personal life, she really didn't apply it to her professional life, and she made a number of pre-code movies that were a little spicy. But now she's thinking that her example extends to her professional life. Okay. Um, so she's having a clash. The producer, the director of China, John Farrow was the director, and production head of Paramount, Bette de Silva. Loretta explained, the teacher I played was to condone the suicide of one of the Chinese girls. I said, "No, I'm sorry. I can't do this picture." Uh, and they said, "Well, then fine. Well, we'll cut the scene." We were 3 weeks into the picture when John Farrell, the director, brought me the blue pages, and the scene was back in. I said, "I'm not going to play this." John said, "Well, then you and I better go see Buddy De Silva, the head producer at Paramount at that point." So we met with Buddy, and he said, "I understand that you refuse to do this scene." I said, "Well, I've already explained all of this before I started the picture, and Myron Selznick, uh, Loretta's agent, got an okay from you. I am diametrically opposed to the theory that suicide is an answer to anything." But he said, "Well, it's only a movie." I said, "I'm sorry, it's not only a movie. If you read some of my fan mail, you'd realize how seriously some people take these movies." Now, he said, "You and your goddamn Catholicism. This is not a church. This is a studio, and we're making pictures to entertain people." I said, "Well, you can always get a new leading lady." But he stood up and pounded on the desk. "You're not going to tell me how to run my studio." I said, "I don't intend to, buddy, but I told you uh, and the studio that I'd only agree to do this picture if that scene were deleted." So who put it back in? Well, the producer said, "Well, Mr. Farrell and the producer think it's important." I said, "Well, Mr. Farrell never mentioned this to me on the set." So John Farrell was sitting right there, and he said, I thought it was the studio's business more than yours." I said, "Well, apparently not." And then I said, "Buddy, you can recast if you like, but I'm not playing that scene as it is now written." John Farrell thoroughly enjoyed the escapade, uh, but the scene was deleted. A little note about John Farrell. He was the father of Mia Farrell. Uh, and also the husband of Maureen O'Sullivan. Anyway, Loretta's two little anecdotes about John Farrell. Loretta saw him at a swimming party one time, and he was like sitting on the diving board, and he had a tattoo like a snake slipping out of his swim trunks. Uh, and of course, it looked like a penis. And of course, he knew it looked like a penis. And the other story I remember Loretta telling me, uh, there may be some missing parts here, but I'll tell you what I remember. Somehow, he was having an affair with a woman, a married woman. And uh, I don't know, was it the husband or somebody all of a sudden was coming home and he had to make an escape and he couldn't get to his clothes. He had to leave the premises driving away naked. So it's kind of a colorful story. Okay. Back to the movie China. A further complication was that Loretta didn't like working with Alan Ladd. Loretta recalled. He was a whiner, and I hate that. It's bad enough for a woman, but in a man, it's very unappealing. Any man who calls for his agent every time he doesn't get his own way, and his agent happens to be his wife, Sue Carroll, there is something radically wrong. Uh, the least little thing that would happen, he'd be on the phone saying, Sue, you better get over here, straighten this out. Now, I remember one time, this is Loretta talking, there was a rain sequence. My dressing room was inside the stage, when his dressing room was outside the stage, and he didn't like that. So he called Sue and said, I'm going to get just as wet as she is. I can get pneumonia just as quickly as she can. You better get over here. There simply was not room on the stage for the set, for the camera, and the crew, and the dressing rooms. He would not work until Sue arrived, so everybody sat around. When she finally came, she went around quietly and talked to the assistant director. They didn't bring his dressing room onto the stage, and I got a cold shoulder from Alan from then on. Ladies Courageous was Loretta's second film with a war theme. It was based on the true activities of the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron. Don't bother with this one. It's really boring. Now, Russell Bidwell was Loretta's public relations representative. So when he came up with the idea for her to ride around Beverly Hills in a horse and carriage to promote the idea of saving gas, she thought it was time to look for someone new. Tom introduced Loretta to Helen Furguson, and for her first project was that Loretta to pose in a Red Cross uniform on the cover of Saturday Home magazine. Loretta felt like this kind of positioning tapped right into her appeal, and her association with Helen would last for the next 25 years, all through those television years. Now, Loretta reflected on what she thought her appeal was to moviegoers. Compared to Joan Crawford or Bette Davis, I was more the average woman. During my years, there were a lot of awfully nice, pretty, sweet, average women. I don't know what the average woman is today, but she's certainly not like they were in the 30s and 40s. My appeal wouldn't have been to the intellectuals or to the neurotics, nor to the shop girls or to the secretaries. That would have been Joan Crawford's market. But there were an awful lot of women out there like me, willing to play by the rules, didn't sleep around, and weren't very aggressive. A Loretta Young movie had a happy ending, a nice husband or lover, no abuse of any kind. That's what the heroes and heroines were in those days. Now, note from me. And this was the reason why most of Loretta's movies don't hold up today. Bette Davis or Joan Crawford movies had conflicted characters, often more bad than good, and they're more interesting. Okay. Now, Loretta's brother-in-law, Norman Foster, headed south to the border to make pictures in Mexico. Sally and their daughter accompanied him. Okay. They met the young actor Ricardo Montalban, who in turn introduced them to his family. Sally remembered his mother saying, Ricardo, if you can find a girl like Sally, get her and marry her. I said, I have one sister left. Heidi decided that I'd bring Ricardo to L.A. specifically to meet Georgiana. Georgiana recalled, I had just celebrated my 19th birthday, and Sally wrote, I have your husband all picked out for you, and I'll send you a picture. The married actor I'd been in love with was also Mexican, so I was expecting to see someone who looked like him. So she sent me Ricardo's picture, and he really didn't look like the other man at all. Ricardo was so handsome, really so pretty, I thought. And I didn't like handsome men. I was more for the John Garfield type. But then I met Ricardo. We were together for 2 weeks, fell madly in love, and went to Tijuana and got married before he went back to Mexico to do a picture. I was supposed to go with him, but didn't because I was pregnant right away. When he came back, he got married in the church, and he had to go back and finish another picture. John Wayne and Carter Herman, now remember Carter Herman is Loretta's brother-in-law, married to her older sister Paulette, were concerned about protecting their wives and children in case the Japanese invaded California. Together, they bought a 1,700-acre ranch outside Fallbrook, California, in San Diego County, and they built a home next to each other. Everyone kept it a big secret so the women and children could quietly disappear if they need be. Pollyanna and Josie were never to live in those homes. The Waynes' marriage would not survive the war. Josie speculated on the reasons. I think success came too soon, too fast for Duke. He had been in a big success, Stagecoach, and I think he woke up one morning and he thought, I'm married, I have 4 children, I'll probably have 10 children before long, and I haven't really gone out and sold my wild oats. That was part of it. But I think our breakup is a combination of a lot of things. When I was going through my divorce, Loretta was absolutely marvelous. I remember feeling depressed and calling Loretta one night. It must have been about 10 or 11. And Miss Shanky, she's like the housekeeper, answered. She said, oh, no. Mrs. Lewis is working in the morning. I can't disturb her now. So I said, okay, fine. That's Josie saying, okay, fine. But the next day, Loretta called me the next morning. And she said, did you call me last night? I said, well, Miss Shanky told me, and Loretta interjected, and I told Miss Shanky that I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. If Mrs. Swain ever calls, put her on the phone immediately. I'll never forget that. Loretta recalled once after their divorce, Duke had invited us to something, and I said no, and Tom disagreed, saying, I think you're carrying things a little far. After all, Josie gets along with him. I said, no, Tom, I'm sorry. Josephine's my best friend. If I were in her situation, I wouldn't appreciate it if she were buddies with my ex-husband. I realize now that the other woman had threatened a scandal if he didn't marry her. Still, she must have had something that fascinated him, or he would have said no. I remember one time I was just arriving at my home, and I saw Duke coming up Camden. This was the first home that Loretta and Tom lived on after they got married. It's called in the flats sections of Beverly Hills, but the flat sections of Beverly Hills. So not the really extravagant homes on big lots. Even from a half a block away, I could see he was looking at me. I hesitated at the driveway, and he sped up, and I said, oh, please, Lord, don't let him stop. I don't want to go through this. This was after he was married to the other woman, and anyway, he stopped for a second. I looked at him. He looked at me, and I went in the house, and he went on. And that was the only contact I had with him for the next 30 years. Now, by all accounts, Tom was doing a fabulous job heading the Armed Forces Radio. He was an important man, the kind of guy he felt he was destined to be. And as for the future, only the sky was the limit, or so he thought. Okay, that's the end of podcast 74.